which involved standing up for Steph Curry. No one could have prepared her for what happened next. The evening shift at Sonny's Diner was always predictable for Lila, a 29-year-old waitress with a warm smile and a knack for making every customer feel special. Located in a quiet part of the small town of Berkeley in San Francisco, Sonny's was a refuge for the older locals who came in to enjoy pie and coffee while chatting about days gone by and watching their favorite sport, basketball. For Lila, the diner was more than a job. It was a comfort zone, a place where she knew everyone by name. But tonight, that familiar rhythm was about to change. The bell above the door jingled, signaling a new customer. Lila glanced up casually, expecting to see a regular, but her heart skipped a beat when she saw who walked in. It was Steph Curry, the Steph Curry of the San Francisco Bears, one of the most celebrated athletes in the world. Steph was well known in the city of San Francisco, given that it was the home of the Bears. For a moment, Lila froze, unable to believe her eyes. Steph was dressed casually, wearing a hoodie and sneakers, and looked like he was trying to stay under the radar. But even in his simple and demure attire, his aura filled the entire room. The older patrons at the counter turned to look, whispering among themselves, some craning their necks, trying to confirm if it was really him. Lila's pulse quickened. She'd seen him dominate on the court countless times, but she never imagined he'd walk into her quiet little diner. Lila was popularly known for her warm smile and attentive service, having worked at Sonny's Diner for 3 years, memorizing the orders and quirks of the diners who frequented the place. The fact that Steph Curry, a celebrity, came to their dainty diner was a big deal for her and the other regulars because they were huge fans of his. Gathering her composure, she approached his table with her usual friendly demeanor. "Good evening. What can I get for you tonight?" Steph smiled warmly, a kindness in his eyes that immediately put her at ease. "Just a coffee black, and maybe a slice of whatever pie you've got." "Coming right up," Lila said, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. She returned to the counter, aware of the buzz his presence was causing. The regulars were murmuring, some smiling in awe, others shaking their heads. As she placed the coffee and pie in front of him, she tried to act normal. "Here you go. Enjoy." "Thanks," Steph said, offering her another smile before turning his gaze out the window. Lila couldn't help but watch him for a moment. There was something unassuming about him. Despite his fame, he seemed lost in thought, maybe even a little tired, but not everyone shared her admiration. Earl, one of the older regulars and a huge fan of the Los Angeles Legends, who were the big-time rivals of the San Francisco Bears, was infamous for his bluntness and, at times, overly critical opinions. Lila was thrilled to serve someone of Steph Curry's stature. She admired him not just for his incredible talent on the court, but for his philanthropic work off it. Yet, as Earl stood and approached Steph's table, her excitement quickly turned to unease. "Excuse me," Earl began, his gruff voice cutting through the diner chatter. "Aren't you that basketball guy, Steph Curry?" Steph looked up, smiling politely. "Yes, that's me." Earl crossed his arms, his face twisted with skepticism. "I've been reading about you," he said. "You make millions, but what do you actually do for folks who need it? Heard you're pretty stingy with all that cash." The accusation hung heavy in the air. Lila, who was clearing plates at the next table, froze. She glanced at Steph, whose calm demeanor showed no discomfort. "I try to give back where I can," Steph replied evenly. "I've supported education programs, built basketball courts for kids, and helped fund charities." Earl scoffed. "Sounds like a PR stunt to me. You big shots only care about your image." Murmurs spread across the diner, with some customers nodding in agreement. Lila felt a surge of indignation. Earl's words were unfair and misinformed, and she couldn't stand by while someone she respected was berated. Summoning her courage, she stepped forward. "Earl," she said, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside. "That's not true. Steph Curry has done more than most people could dream of. He's given scholarships to students who couldn't afford college, donated to disaster relief efforts, and supported mental health programs." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to her. Earl's brow furrowed. "And you believe all that? How do you know he's not just doing it for the headlines?" "Because actions speak louder than words," Lila countered. "I've read about the kids whose lives have changed because of his foundation. He doesn't have to do any of that, but he does because he cares." "I couldn't stop thinking about what happened last night," Steph Curry said softly. Steph began, his tone calm but sincere. "You stood up for me when you didn't have to, and I respect that more than I can say." Lila blinked, unsure of how to respond. "I just thought you deserved someone to stand up for you," she said quietly, her voice almost trembling. "And that's exactly why I'm here," Steph continued, leaning forward slightly. "What you did took courage. It showed me the kind of person you are, someone who stands up for what's right, even when it's hard. That's rare, and it's something I deeply admire." Lila tilted her head, confusion mingling with disbelief. "I don't understand," she said. "Why are you here?" Steph smiled, his expression kind yet determined. "My foundation is expanding. We're launching new programs to support underprivileged kids, improve access to education, and create opportunities for people who need a second chance. We need people who are passionate about making a difference, people like you." Lila's breath caught in her throat. "Are you serious?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Completely," Steph said without hesitation. "I want you to join the team. It's not waiting tables, but it's a chance to be part of something bigger, to use your voice and your heart to help others." For a moment, Lila sat in stunned silence. The weight of his words, the sheer improbability of this offer left her speechless. Tears welled up in her eyes as the reality began to sink in. She had lost her job, but in its place, she was being offered an opportunity beyond anything she'd ever imagined. "I don't know what to say," she whispered finally, her voice thick with emotion. "Say yes," Steph said, flashing a grin that made her laugh through her tears. Lila nodded, her resolve finally breaking into a wide, tearful smile. "Yes, absolutely, yes." Steph reached across the table and shook her hand, sealing the deal. Around them, the diner remained eerily quiet. The regulars who had once judged her so harshly now sat stunned into silence. Lila couldn't help but glance at Earl, whose expression was a mix of disbelief and what looked like begrudging respect. Mr. Foster, meanwhile, stood rigid behind the counter, his jaw clenched tightly as he processed what was unfolding. His face betrayed a hint of guilt, but Lila didn't dwell on it. Her focus was on the future. As Steph rose to leave, he turned back to Lila. "I'll have someone from my team reach out to you today to get things started. Thank you again for what you did. It meant more than you know." The bell above the door chimed as he walked out, the sound echoing through the diner like the closing of one chapter and the start of another. Lila sat for a moment, trying to steady her breathing. Then she stood, her resolve firm, and walked to the counter to collect her paycheck. Mr. Foster handed it to her with guilt written all over his face. He then grudgingly said, "Although I feel you shouldn't have done what you did last night, I'm sorry for how badly I might have treated you." Lila met his gaze steadily. "You taught me a valuable lesson," she replied simply. "Sometimes standing up for what's right is worth more than staying quiet to keep a job." With that, she turned and stepped into the sunlight, her heart light with hope. In the weeks that followed, Lila joined Steph Curry's foundation and threw herself into work that felt meaningful and fulfilling. She traveled to communities in need, helped organize educational programs, and met countless individuals whose lives were transformed by their efforts. For the first time, she felt like her voice and actions truly mattered. Looking back, she realized that losing her job at Foster's Diner wasn't the end she had feared. It was the beginning of a life filled with purpose. That one chance encounter with Steph Curry had changed everything, proving that sometimes standing up for what's right opens doors to a brighter future.